April 14, 1912. A cold night in the North Atlantic. One of the greatest symbols of modern technology, the ship once called unsinkable, was about to prove that even humanity's greatest dreams can turn into nightmares. The Titanic was not just a maritime accident. It was a tragedy marked by arrogance, inequality, and secrets that still spark controversy to this day. While the orchestra played to calm the passengers, hundreds of people struggled for space in the insufficient lifeboats. And amid the chaos, poor decisions and hidden interests turned what could have been a rescue into one of the greatest disasters in history. But the question remains, what really happened that night? What errors and injustices were hidden behind the tragedy? And why, more than a century later, does the Titanic still fascinate and haunt us? That's what you're going to discover today, here on AI History in Titanic, the dark side of the tragedy that shocked the world. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future journeys into history's darkest chapters. And tell me in the comments, if you had been on board the Titanic that night, do you think you would have survived? At the beginning of the 20th century, the world was living an era of optimism and faith in progress. The Industrial Revolution had transformed cities, created fortunes, and given rise to a generation that believed technology could conquer even nature itself. It was in this context that the project of the Titanic was born, built by the White Star Line. It wasn't just a ship, but a symbol of power and modernity. At 269 meters long, 53 meters high, and filled with luxuries never before seen on a vessel, the Titanic was presented as the largest, safest, and most sophisticated ship of its time. The newspapers called it unsinkable, a title that later would sound like cruel irony. But back then, it embodied humanity's unlimited confidence in progress. The Titanic also reflected the social inequalities of the early 20th century. First-class passengers enjoyed luxurious suites, elegant dining rooms, a heated pool, a library, and even a gymnasium. Third-class passengers, mostly immigrants seeking a new life in America, traveled in small, cramped cabins with no access to the luxuries of the elite. This contrast was not seen as a problem. It was simply a reflection of the world as it was, divided between those who ruled and those who merely dreamed. And so the Titanic left Southampton bound for New York as the ship of dreams. A giant of steel carrying the promise of the future and the illusion that humanity had conquered the sea. What no one imagined was that, in just a few days, this same ship would become the symbol of human vulnerability before nature, and of the arrogance that can turn dreams into tragedy. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic departed from the port of Southampton, England, on its long-awaited maiden voyage to New York. On board were about 2,200 people, including passengers and crew. The atmosphere was one of excitement. For first-class passengers, it was an unparalleled luxury experience. Politicians, businessmen, artists, and millionaires traveled surrounded by butlers, exquisite meals, and elegant halls that looked more like floating palaces. In third class, reality was very different. Hundreds of European immigrants from Ireland, Italy, and Scandinavia boarded with the hope of starting a new life in America. Though their cabins were modest, many saw the journey as a leap toward a better future. The ship was also a technological marvel. It had wireless telegraphy, an advanced system of watertight compartments, and state-of-the-art navigation equipment for its time. All of this reinforced the idea that the Titanic was invincible, but there were signs of overconfidence. The crew believed the safety compartments could keep the ship afloat even after severe damage. For that reason, only 20 lifeboats were installed, enough for just over half the people on board, a detail that would become shocking after the disaster. During the first days, the atmosphere was festive. There was music, parties, luxurious dinners, and animated conversations about the future. For many, being on the Titanic was to live a historic moment, as if nothing could interrupt that journey. But beneath the icy waters of the North Atlantic, fate had already been sealed, and blind faith in technology was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. It was the night of April 14, 1912. The Titanic sped across the North Atlantic at high speed, despite numerous iceberg warnings received throughout the day. The crew, confident in the ship's strength, kept course without much concern. The sea was eerily calm, almost like a mirror. This detail, which seemed reassuring, actually made spotting icebergs more difficult, since waves usually revealed their outlines. At 11:40 p.m., two lookouts spotted a massive iceberg ahead. The warning was immediate, and the helmsman tried to steer away, but it was too late. The Titanic didn't strike head-on, which might have caused less damage, but instead scraped along the side. The ice tore open a series of gashes in the hull, breaching 5 watertight compartments. The impact wasn't violent enough to cause immediate panic among passengers. Many didn't even realize the seriousness of what had happened. But in the control room, Captain Edward Smith and the engineers quickly understood. The Titanic was doomed. Water was flooding the ship at an alarming speed. The compartment system, considered a technological marvel, couldn't stop the flooding. Within minutes, the certainty of being unsinkable had turned into silent chaos. While some still danced to the sound of the orchestra in the salons, deep inside the ship, crew members were already fighting desperately against the inevitable. The tragedy had begun, and it would expose not only the fragility of technology but also the social inequalities of the era. When the seriousness of the situation was finally announced, the evacuation began. And here the darkest side of the Titanic was revealed: social inequality and fatal errors in planning. The ship carried over 2,200 people, but had lifeboats for just over 100. Even so, not all of them were filled. In the chaos, some lifeboats left half empty, while hundreds of desperate passengers remained on deck. Class differences also proved decisive. First-class passengers were given priority and escorted with greater organization to the lifeboats. Third-class passengers, mostly immigrants, faced locked doors, confusing corridors, and even physical barriers that made access to the upper decks difficult. Many simply never had a chance. Meanwhile, the nearby SS Californian could have provided rescue. However, reports suggest its crew did not correctly interpret the Titanic's distress signals, losing a crucial opportunity to save lives. On the decks, the contrast was stark. On one side, women and children of the elite were seated in relatively organized lifeboats. On the other, entire immigrant families begged for help, unable to overcome the barriers imposed by the very ship they had boarded. The orchestra kept playing, an attempt to maintain calm, but the music became only the soundtrack for the growing despair. What could have been a more efficient rescue turned into a tragedy marked by injustice, inequality, and negligence. The Titanic's sinking was not just a maritime disaster. Over time, it gave rise to a series of mysteries and conspiracy theories that still fuel imagination. Right after the tragedy, accusations arose that the White Star Line, owner of the ship, had hidden crucial information. Many believed the company downplayed the risks of the voyage and ignored safety warnings to maintain the reputation of the unsinkable. Another controversy involves the SS Californian, which was relatively close. Why didn't its crew respond immediately to the Titanic's signals? Some argue negligence. Others suggest the telegraph operators were asleep and missed the distress calls. But the theories don't stop there. Some believe the ship that sank wasn't the Titanic at all, but its sister ship, the Olympic, which had suffered prior damage in accidents. According to this theory, the White Star Line swapped the ships deliberately to cover losses, leading to the disaster. Another theory points to economic interests. Some prominent passengers, including wealthy businessmen opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve, the U.S. central bank, perished in the sinking. Conspiracy theorists argue that their deaths paved the way for powerful financial interests. While most of these theories lack solid evidence, they show how the Titanic became more than just an accident. It turned into a symbol loaded with secrets, injustices, and speculation. Even after decades of research and discoveries from the ocean floor, the Titanic remains surrounded by an aura of mystery, as if hidden truths still lie beneath the icy waters of the Atlantic. The Titanic's tragedy didn't end on the morning of April 15, 1912. Its consequences echoed far beyond the Atlantic, leaving deep marks on society, politics, and culture. Practically speaking, the disaster exposed glaring failures in maritime safety. After it, new international laws required lifeboats for all passengers, stricter evacuation drills, and 24-hour radio communication on ships. The Titanic became the turning point for modern navigation safety. But the legacy isn't just technical, it's also emotional and cultural. The Titanic became synonymous with human arrogance against nature, a reminder that no technological advance can completely eliminate risk. The fascination with the tragedy endures. From books and documentaries to Hollywood productions, the Titanic became a modern myth, a story of pride, inequality, and loss. Its image is etched not only in maritime history, but in humanity's collective imagination. Even today, when we think of the Titanic, we don't just remember a ship that sank. We remember a dream that turned into a nightmare, and how that tragedy exposed the darkest side of our own society. The Titanic was not just the sinking of a grand ship, it was the sinking of an era, one defined by blind faith in progress and the belief that technology could overcome even the forces of nature. The disaster revealed human failures, social inequalities, and misguided decisions that cost thousands of lives. It also showed how pride and self-interest can outweigh safety and compassion. More than a century later, the Titanic lives on in collective memory, not only as a tragedy, but as an eternal warning. No matter how advanced humanity becomes, we remain vulnerable, often victims of our own arrogance. And now I ask you, if the Titanic made the same voyage today, with all our modern technology, do you believe the story would end differently? Or would human error still be capable of repeating the tragedy? Leave your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to AI History, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next journeys into the darkest chapters of history. Because history, even in its most painful pages, always has something to teach us.